Hello, Brother Kenneth. Welcome to the Art of the Deals on this nameless and titleless topic here. Perhaps we might stray all over the place. But on the top of our form that we initially fill out over the phone, in some cases, the people might pick it up or, it depends. There's check boxes that are on there that basically prompt for immediate consideration relating to a case. That's so that we get red flags early rather than later. Like, imagine if you spend some several time giving someone spiritual advice, and then you find out they're not on their meds and they're pretty nuts. I mean, just to be blunt about it. So on the top of the page, we added some things that are relevant, not individually, but together. And it's a checkbox list. I don't have a copy, and I'm not allowed to put up the official paperwork that we used. But the point being is that we're going to give you a little idea of what to look for in your clients initially in the first phone call, so if you even want to take the case. You don't want to get every case that just seems like they're nuts and you got to turn them over to a psychologist. That's if you have a qualified one who understands the options of that it might be a demon instead of just a medical or mental condition. And those are rare in itself. Anybody who has the knowledge, they shouldn't try to discern anything except that it's not mental. But that's not a very easy job. That's why you need the people who are qualified to actually make the call that it's demonic or not, because when they eliminate that, then you're looking closer with the psychology. So doing it backwards can be very dangerous, because you don't want to rely on a psychologist, even a couch chair demonologist or whatever, in their own opinion. It's not like you can go to any college and then minor in that. It doesn't work that way. All right, so on the top of the list, here's a few red flags. Now, if you get a call from a person, one of the things is let's look at how their life is around them, and it's not usually forthcoming. I don't know why. Maybe it's because when they were out before trying to find help, these things came up, and then the attitude changed about the people who wanted to help them. Like when you hear they're on psychotropes for paranoid schizophrenia. And even if they say they don't work, what do you think the priest or the receptionist or whatever at the diocese office is going to do if she's giving you the intake forms? Well, okay, so in the first form, living alone. And this is not, doesn't mean that, you or somebody else is not demonized and they're off their nut. Instead, you got to pay attention to the combination of these things in any list. One time I tried to come up with a list to help simplify people who asked me for the question, to say, do you have something like a demonic checklist so that they can go through it and go, no, or yes? And the more things checked off, obviously, the more it's pointing towards it. That's if the things, the experiences and so forth on the checklist have been validated. And secondly is, have they been validated by a third party one way or another? Okay, so this is why living alone can be a problem. When you're trying to get through to the core of the case. You don't have any support system. There is a person who lives in a supposed haunted house, or you're supposedly oppressed or possessed. And living alone also has some psychological effects that are negative in themselves, just for not having outside contact. It's kind of a stereotype that when people are stuck on an island, I mean, that's a lot more extreme, being cut off from civilization totally, but shut-ins can actually fall into that too. And the funny thing is sometimes we find that they're only a shut-in for something psychological. They're not disabled where they can't drive the car. Maybe they became so fearful, which is, like paranoid schizophrenia, that it's just all about them not going outside because they might get hurt. Who knows? But they're not forthcoming with these things. So it's not like you can even just ask them for a psychologist that they had, and you're going to call them up and get their information if they release the files, by signing a disclaimer form, which we have. It's that they're probably not even going to tell you that they've been seeing a shrink, because they're afraid that you're going to go down the same road everybody else did, and that's a problem there too. So the living alone is the first red flag, but it's not so much a red flag as it is when they don't have a job, because not only are you living alone, which a lot of people, I had an apartment by myself for a while there too. Roommates come and go. That's the problem, even when you're good friends. Guys ought to know that, with some point or another like that. He finds the girl, they decide they're going to get a place together, and they move out and leave you to paying full rent. And that's not the way you intended. No one thinks ahead when you're in your 20s. like that. It's like, what did they move out? Well, it's my good friend. He wouldn't do that. Well, you forgot about variable 3. So they're not working at all on these cases when these people are alone. That's an even bigger problem because now they're cut off from society. Now, are you finding out that they're going to the grocery stores and walking around Walmart? It's not the same. Just having a small conversation with a Walmart associate, at the cashier, helping you out with self-checkout. So those little small conversations that happen don't really keep them in there. Sometimes you need friends who check up on you and said, do you really believe that? And then, they raise a concern. That keeps them in check because they get in their own little world of what's normal and what's not by just being living alone. And let's not forget, we had some hermit monks in the past who were pretty much solitary, but you might be a little off, and if you're not having interaction with people, that's because there's some social norm that has been placed upon us, what we consider normal. Let's say a guy is obsessed with baseball. He lives alone. You're going to find he just talks about baseball. But you know what? If you find a baseball fan, they'll talk the same. You actually created some kind of commonality in that, even ground by being a baseball fan. Now, if he talks about a day and night and stuff like that, well, that's not even going to be known unless he becomes A, a roommate, or B, someone to pal around with, like, hey, let's go see this movie. Nothing to do with baseball. He's talking about baseball before it starts all the time. And eventually the guy or gal, or something like that, just an example, will say, like, all they do is talk about baseball. It's like they're obsessed over it. Well, maybe it's because he's absorbing it so much. That's the only thing they can think of and talk about. Well, what happens when you got someone living alone who doesn't work, like they're disabled or something, and then they continually, they're watching horror stories and stuff like that, or talking about their problem on Facebook, which is what they do a lot of times, and all they're thinking about is this so-called paranormal occurrences around there. Think between baseball, and that big difference, because the one is kindling to, could be a delusion, it could be. It's not going to be if it's real, it's not going to make the problem go away. You remember the old idea that if you ignore it, it may go away? Well, to some degree that's true, but you should still pray discreetly. We should always pray to be sure that any ailment that overcomes you, that you pray it to make sure that it is not diabolical effects. You don't know, because we've seen those things, like with Lee on that Love Curse story. That was put on there by a person who basically, it was put on them by a demon. Even if they didn't realize it, it did it. Because, well, it's the spiritual prayers wouldn't have worked. They weren't like, say, heal this boy or anything like that. It was deliverance prayers. And those wouldn't have worked unless the spirit causes that stuff. I don't need to convince anybody out there that demons can cause physical ailments. All we have to do is watch the next wannabe demonologist get hit within the next 5 to 10 years with strange illnesses and hardships, and they quit. They all drop out, every single one of them. And if they don't, they might be on the opposite spectrum of the swing too. That's where you appease them more often than you don't. So if you're following in the path that we are with the traditional methods, none of this kind of new agey or charismatic or anything like that, the stuff that's been used for the last 600 years almost in the church and prior, because the old school method is not going to be replaced by some new one. It's all Bob Larson illusion, delusional actors, bad actors, at that. That let's not confuse real exorcisms, real deliverance with the false, just any more than possessions, real possessions versus false possessions. Okay, so we're going through this list. I just wanted to put that little note in there. Okay, they don't work. So they don't have to contact socially every day. And they also don't live with someone else. So no one can keep them checked like, that's weird. Something besides like, hey, the moon landing was a fake. There's it's another story about that. But it's one of these really off things like, I think the neighbors are spying on us. You'll get these kind of paranoid schizophrenia symptoms, which comes with dementia too. And when you're dealing with an older person, you may be dealing with somebody who's got dementia or something along that lines, because they start to roll in by default when they get older, they'll say, out there for whatever reason. So age has something to do with it too. If they're a younger person, oh yeah, sure, they can have some of those things. It's not really healthy for a young person to just be locked up like a shut-in anyway. But we've seen it. and nothing can be kept in check. That's a good thing about having a spouse. Have a spouse who's a skeptic is not a bad thing, and that's what the guys do typically. The guys are the logical ones, but they get too far on it and they refuse it because they don't want to recognize and understand it. So now you're dealing with this kind of thing, and that's why there's a bigger problem with men being possessed versus the women, because the men, just think, she's just PMSing, she's just menopausal, like they're starting to drift apart or whatever it is. The husbands don't even say that's a Jezebel spirit or that's possession or anything like that. The women would. If they see drastic changes in the husband, which can go, more negative, you could say more crabby, impatient, maybe even prone to going, instead of yelling, actually hitting her one day, whatever happens or something like that. But the women won't be reported by the husbands, and that's one of the reasons why it's rare. Did you know the statistic is still out there that says that women are more likely to be the ones possessed, and it's a large number? But you look also, the statistics used to hold a lot of other things about women, and that same thing that shows that they're vulnerable, such as that they're more likely to be molested, and they'll deal with, for various reasons, depression and anxiety. These are clinical, and they're like 3 times higher than it is for men, but that's changing in the last 10 years. It looks like maybe 10 to 20 since 2000 and beyond. So these statistics are going to have to be revisited because of the way the nature of this generation seems to be changing. We'll just say leaning to the left too, which is not going to be a good way to lean. All right, so we got 3 of them right there. It doesn't work, and they live alone, and I mentioned elderly. That's a 3rd one right there, and that's one for the checklist, even though it isn't on there, because the other things usually add on to it in itself, such as PTSD. Are they former combat veterans? Do they have PTSD because of some trauma, like family members dying too many and too soon? I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it, but PTSD is on the list because it can add to be a problem that you're dealing with something psychological that's going to interfere with the exorcism and the success of the liberation overall. They got to want to get rid of it. They have to be honest and truthful so that they're revealing everything, and they don't hold any unforgiveness back or resentment or guilt, which is not forgiving yourself. And we put in our book, the Haunting Self-Help Guidebook, that there's a problem with people forgiving themselves. And we know this abortion, and just like everybody's making excuses, who's going to feed them and all this other stuff, there is no excuse for murder, no matter what. There's no excuse, because you could say the same thing about anybody. A husband you're tired of, your grandmother who's like, in the nursing home, and she's got dementia and all this other stuff. Hey, she's burning the bills. Just unplug her in the life support when she goes into something like she needs an oxygen tent because she got pneumonia. And it's not like being plugged into one of those machines that keep you alive and your brain dead. But they want to do it for everything. They always want an excuse for this kind of thing. That's society. That's what I mean by this generation. If the adults are acting like this, what are the next generations going to be like seeing the adults act like that? How are they going to respect life? And what's going to be next in the chopping block? Okay, so the other thing is it's just along the same line, and those things are the biggest 3 things. But we also see that they had former psychological care, but that one's hard to get out of them, and you have to ask it in such a way that they don't feel like it's going to pertain to your investigation, that it's just routine. But they still may lie because they probably already saw somebody, and you're not the first person, the investigator. Or exorcist, whatever stage or whatever thing you do. Some exorcists will do the investigation and everything, do the whole 9 yards. So, but traditionally exorcists don't do that. They go there and they try to close the case after they've been issued because it's demonic, and they're supposed to know it. Most they wouldn't have been called in the old days, especially. The exorcists didn't come and do this because there was only a few of them in America, and they had to fly out of state almost all the time. And the church scrutinized things rather than use the resources of any nutty guy or some guy who's tripping on LSD and then gave himself brain damage, and now he seems to be permanently that way. I mean, that's the kind of things that we're looking at in the 70s, 60s. All right, but see, the meds thing too is like, are they taking meds and they are off? We had a possession case where the person got off the meds, and it was for depression and anxiety. which is very common. It's like nearly every possession case will have inflated anxiety, but not necessarily depression. The presence of a demonic, even if you can't see them, one way or another you feel it, is it's there like something is upon you that you're not aware of. You'll still feel the effects of it. Let's say, sometimes people could be intuitive about bad things. You got this bad gut feeling for a while, but there's nothing on deck, like a court date or something where you might lose your license for drunk driving, or some operation is going to go bad, but you got a feeling of something's wrong. That's what it is. It's your instinct in part, and it's raising your anxiety, because that's all it knows how to do, is just trigger this negative emotion, because fear and anxiety go hand in hand too. So you got those, and those are symptoms right there, but they're not red flags. They're with everybody. It's just that when they go along with the other ones, anxiety can be triggered by fear, or fear can trigger anxiety. Is that we wonder sometimes what's come first, the chicken or the egg? I get a hold of some of these people, when they call me, and they sound like they're very much paranoid schizophrenic. So we have to listen closely to this. One of the things is that when they speak and they talk about all these things, how credible are the things they say? Do they seem kind of imaginary and fantasy, or does it have some real precedence to it? So continue with the red flags. So obviously, if they're not following a medication, you find out about it, and they'll say it's not really doing anything anyway. Well, back to that possession with this gal, when she took the meds, it leveled her out. The depression was so bad it makes you vulnerable to spirit invasion, because you leave a revolving door in that. Because let's say you're really depressed, you're going to lock your car? Are you going to leave your door open? Are you going to make your bed? Look at all the things that you don't do. So you back off on everything. And at some point or another, I forgot to lock the door. Oh, someone comes in and kills me. Who cares? Sometimes the attitude is like that. But if they can chemically change this in itself, even though the demonic can enhance it, and then it works, it will level the playing field so they're not so vulnerable to demonic possession and to some degree oppression. And that's a good thing. Unfortunately, we have to rely sometimes on the sciences in that sense. And I mean unfortunate, because a lot of times they're putting on people on drugs that don't need drugs. They need a spiritual assistance in the least, or they're putting them on chemicals that are addictive, or they give more side effects than they solve. Like when I was talking the other day on another video, I mentioned that the sleep paralysis drug causes sleep paralysis as one of the side effects. So they're trying to solve something that, in our opinion, in our experience, 100% of the cases that we worked on that had sleep paralysis involved with it were not medical, they were spiritual. Because you can't tell your body to just suddenly snap out of it if it's supposed to be detached. Like, your body just laying there, and your brain didn't connect and realize that, your body's back online again. Watch the sleep paralysis video a bit. That's on this channel here. So I guess the main topic is that we have to really watch for the red flags, and you have to listen to what they say. One gal talked, and this isn't in a checklist, I'm not covering that necessarily. She talked 100 miles an hour. This is not one gal, I'm just giving you an example, because they do this a lot. When you start to suspect that it's a paranoid schizophrenia, why do they seem so excited that they're going on and on, and they're talking really fast, and there's a trench in my backyard, and a hellhound came out of it, and it's like, and then I used to live by a hospital, and they were the hospital that actually had where I was born in, and they put a little microchip in my toe so they could track me for some new government. I mean, that's how fast they talk, and they don't even take a breath, and I'm like, they want to hear themselves talk and tell their little paranoid stories. And I mean, not to be disrespectful, but the alien chips in the toe, or even aliens, is suspicious. All of this kind of stuff is this conspiracy theory stuff. Like I said, the moon landing doesn't count. There's a lot of evidence out there that can bring up that argument, more than the flat earth. That one's really lame. But and Illuminati and Freemasons, oh yeah, there's a history, there's a timeline, everything for it. It all exists. Yes, and they were basically satanic. That means they worship Satanism, not that they just listen to Slayer, or King Diamond, some of these old 80 bands that seem to promote it heavy. All right, so ignorance is not bliss. And if it starts to, offend me, I'm going to say something about it, because if it offends me, it offends God, it offends heaven, it offends all Catholics. And sometimes the record just needs to be set straight. So we're always going to insert those things in there, so be ready for it. The truth sets you free, right? I think we're going to end it on this one right now because we don't want to go as long as we even have. We've gone way over. And it's just a little primer, watching out for all those things they say and the red flags. But this one's a lot longer one. And if it needs, to justify further information, that's fine. And the usual, give me the thumbs up, the likes, and the subscribe. And also in this, I would like to ask you if you could just go ahead and, in the comments below, hey, say, hey, could you answer this time next to your video? And, put some suggestions in there. If we find a lot of them on this topic or any other, we might make a part 2 or something, or put it on the Real Deal's live TV show with Vera. So, well, God bless everybody, and next time, we'll see you, and rather, you'll see me. God bless. God bless. God bless. God bless. God bless. God bless.